You do absolutely everything that the fake spiritual gurus tell you to do. You perfectly visualize your massive wealth every single day. You constantly repeat positive affirmations, and you desperately try to maintain a high vibration. But your physical bank account continues to remain completely painfully empty. I am going to tell you a brutal, highly offensive truth today that the massive manifestation community is actively trying to hide from you. The flawless law of assumption is currently mathematically working perfectly in your life, but it is actually working completely entirely against you. You are currently unknowingly displaying three massive psychological signs that prove you are actively using your own divine quantum power to keep your bank account completely empty forever. Today we are going to use the uncompromising laws of Neville Goddard to violently expose these three invisible signs and completely teach you exactly how to instantly reverse them. If you want to permanently stop sabotaging your own infinite wealth and instantly assume the heavy control of your financial empire today, take a brief moment to subscribe to this channel right now. Your exhausting era of using the law against yourself completely dies today, and your era of mathematically guaranteed wealth begins in this exact microsecond. We must immediately dissect the absolute first and most completely destructive trap that is actively keeping you trapped in the massive middle-class survival mode. I call this the massive toxic trap of tomorrow. The entire global manifestation community heavily encourages you to passionately practice the toxic biological feeling of hope. They aggressively tell you to quietly, confidently affirm to the blind universe that your massive money is coming very soon, or that you are currently in the slow physical process of becoming incredibly wealthy. Your logical human brain hears the phrase, "My millions of dollars are coming," and it immediately feels a tiny temporary wave of biological relief. You completely falsely believe that you are doing excellent spiritual work simply because you feel slightly optimistic about your physical future. But I must violently, completely shatter this pathetic illusion right now in this exact moment. Having hope for the future is the absolute most dangerous and completely toxic biological frequency you can possibly hold in the massive quantum field. Hope is absolutely not a beautiful spiritual virtue. Hope is the absolute, undeniable mathematical proof that you completely, entirely lack your specific desire in the eternal present moment. To deeply, completely understand exactly why the toxic trap of tomorrow completely destroys your physical, financial empire, you must deeply analyze exactly how your human subconscious machine actually biologically operates. The blind mechanical machine of your subconscious mind has absolutely zero understanding of the physical human concept of tomorrow. It completely, entirely lacks the biological mechanical ability to process the human future or logically remember the human past. The massive quantum machine exclusively, flawlessly operates strictly in the absolute eternal present moment. When you constantly loudly declare to the physical universe that your massive wealth is safely on its way, you are actively loudly declaring to your own internal biological vault that you absolutely do not have the physical money right. Now, because the blind subconscious machine only mathematically understands the present moment, it flawlessly, perfectly takes your current heavy feeling of lack and mathematically forces the dead physical mirror to continuously print more empty lack in your daily physical reality. You are literally vigorously using the flawless law of assumption to flawlessly assume that you are always permanently waiting. The blind universe completely aggressively obeys your internal command and successfully keeps your massive money permanently stuck in a tomorrow that mathematically, absolutely never actually arrives. You must deeply, entirely recognize that the physical act of slowly becoming rich is a completely fake biological illusion. The physical three-dimensional matrix heavily, aggressively programs you to believe in the slow, logical transition of physical time. The matrix desperately wants you to deeply believe that you must slowly, gradually, physically climb a massive physical ladder, from absolute extreme poverty to massive infinite wealth. When you fall completely into the massive trap of becoming, you literally spend your entire human life desperately climbing a heavy physical ladder that absolutely has no top. You constantly biologically feel exactly like you are getting slightly closer to your massive financial goal, but you never actually securely, heavily sit directly on the heavy throne of the finished creation. The elite psychopathic creator absolutely never falls into this massive, exhausting trap. The true elite master deeply, intimately understands that there is absolutely no physical ladder and there is absolutely no slow physical transition. There is only the absolute, terrifying, heavy, massive power of the current present identity. The elite, untouchable creator absolutely refuses to be on the physical way to massive wealth. They entirely, forcefully, completely demand to be massively wealthy right now, entirely without apologies and completely without waiting for the slow physical timeline to finally logically catch up. Neville Goddard entirely, completely destroyed the toxic, massive trap of tomorrow when he brilliantly, heavily revealed the massive, ultimate psychological power of the phrase, I am. He absolutely never told his dedicated students to boldly say, I will be. He clearly, violently warned them that the future tense is a massive psychological trap that completely paralyzes the infinite quantum field. The powerful phrase, I am, is the absolute, supreme, divine name of the ultimate psychopathic creator. It is the absolute highest spiritual command that directly, forcefully moves the massive physical atoms of the blind universe. When you violently, aggressively activate the overpowering rule of I am, you forcefully teleport your divine human consciousness directly into the absolute, final, finished end result. You completely, violently bypass the long, exhausting bridge of physical incidents, and you violently assume your heavy position entirely inside the finished physical creation. You absolutely do not politely, quietly ask the blind mechanical universe to eventually bring you your massive paper money. You completely, coldly, loudly announce that the massive physical transaction is entirely, perfectly complete right now. You absolutely, completely replace the toxic, pathetic, biological feeling of hope with the terrifying, cold, psychopathic arrogance of absolute, permanent, present ownership. You must aggressively, vigorously, completely eliminate every single trace of biological waiting entirely from your human nervous system. Waiting is a massive biological, psychological poison that completely, entirely paralyzes your divine ability to manifest. When you secretly, desperately wait for a physical text message, a physical corporate promotion, or a massive physical bank deposit, your human body literally biologically vibrates with the heavy toxic frequency of physical separation. You feel completely biologically, physically separated from your massive desire, and that exact heavy feeling of physical distance forces the blind universe to mathematically, completely create more massive physical distance between you and your massive money. To successfully, completely, violently escape the massive trap of tomorrow, you must entirely, vigorously hack your own biological nervous system right now. You must forcefully, manually dictate to your physical human body to deeply, truly feel exactly how it would physically, naturally feel if the massive millions of dollars were already securely, heavily sitting directly inside your physical bank account. If you actually, truly, physically, mathematically possessed $50 million right now, in this exact microsecond, you absolutely would not feel desperate biological hope. And you entirely, completely would not feel excited, frantic, anticipation. You would simply, naturally feel completely normal, heavily unbothered, and intensely, deeply, physically safe. This profound, heavy, absolute feeling of massive, unbothered, normal safety is the exact, ultimate psychological secret to permanently destroying the massive trap of tomorrow. The amateur terrified manifester completely logically thinks they secretly need to feel massive biological extreme excitement to properly manifest money. They falsely, entirely, completely believe that physically jumping up and down with extreme positive biological emotion will somehow magically, magnetically attract the physical wealth. This is yet another massive toxic trap, deliberately hidden in plain physical sight. Extreme physical biological excitement is actually a massive biological confession to the universe that the physical financial event is completely rare and entirely unusual for your normal human nervous system. If you are massively biologically excited about finally receiving physical money, you are loudly, clearly telling the massive quantum field that you are absolutely not normally used to having massive infinite money. The true elite psychopathic master absolutely feels absolute cold, heavy apathy when they deeply think about their massive, immense wealth. They feel exactly the same boring, heavy daily normalcy that you currently casually feel about the cheap physical pair of shoes you wear every single normal day. You must deliberately, aggressively cultivate this massive, heavy, boring feeling of normal wealth right now. You must entirely, completely, heavily treat your massive, desired millions exactly like an absolute, boring, normal, daily physical fact of your current physical existence. When you successfully, completely, entirely drop the toxic biological hope of tomorrow, and you violently, aggressively assume the heavy, unbothered psychopathic apathy of the eternal present, the blind, mechanical universe immediately goes into absolute biological shock. The dead physical matrix mathematically absolutely realizes that your internal psychological reality has completely violently shifted, and it can absolutely no longer trap you in the massive, endless, exhausting loop of constantly waiting. Because the supreme law of assumption is a flawless mathematical law of quantum physics, the universe absolutely cannot logically allow a massive, terrifying contradiction between your internal, present heavy state and your external physical reality. The dead physical mirror is violently, mathematically, completely forced to rapidly collapse the massive illusion of time to quickly, flawlessly catch up with your new elite present identity. The universe must violently, frantically scramble millions of physical atoms and entirely, completely restructure the massive global economy just to quickly, heavily dump the massive physical wealth directly into your human hands. It does this absolutely not to kindly reward you for your pathetic patience, but to frantically, desperately fix the massive quantum glitch you forcefully created by boldly daring to be incredibly rich before the physical proof even logically arrived. You must mathematically, legally, coldly force the physical mirror to perfectly, completely obey your absolute present command. You must absolutely never again ever patiently wait for the massive, absolute toxic illusion of tomorrow. We must now immediately forcefully enter the second massive chamber of this psychological masterclass and aggressively, completely destroy the absolute second deadly sign that the law of assumption is currently working against you. I call this the massive toxic sign of the eternal student. You must deeply, completely look at your own daily physical habits with absolute cold honesty right now. You spend dozens of hours every single week endlessly watching manifestation videos, you constantly read massive, complex spiritual books, and you desperately jump from one completely new quantum technique to another. You deeply falsely believe that you simply logically need to find one more hidden secret or understand one more complex physical theory before you can finally successfully manifest your massive wealth. You deeply convince yourself that you are actively building your massive empire because you are constantly gathering massive amounts of new spiritual information. I must completely, violently shatter this pathetic biological illusion right now. Gathering spiritual information is absolutely not the same physical action as actually assuming the heavy God state. Consuming massive amounts of manifestation content is the exact specific trap the physical matrix uses to keep you completely paralyzed in a permanent state of passive biological preparation. You must deeply, entirely understand the exact dangerous chemical reaction that actively occurs inside your physical brain when you constantly consume this massive spiritual content. Every single time you watch a brand new manifestation video or logically learn a completely new psychological technique, your primitive animal brain instantly releases a massive, highly addictive wave of chemical dopamine. This massive surge of biological dopamine completely tricks your physical nervous system into falsely believing that you have actually successfully achieved a massive physical goal. You feel a sudden massive rush of temporary motivation, and you completely biologically feel exactly like you are finally making massive real progress toward your absolute infinite wealth. But you have absolutely not made any real physical progress at all. You have simply entirely temporarily drugged your own physical brain with the toxic, cheap chemical illusion of success. You finish watching the video, you feel completely biologically satisfied for a few short hours, and then you entirely immediately return to your exact same pathetic, poor physical reality. You are absolutely not a supreme psychopathic creator. You have completely unknowingly become a desperate biological junkie, actively addicted to the cheap chemical high of consuming spiritual theory. This massive trap of eternal studying mathematically perfectly guarantees that your physical bank account remains completely, totally empty forever. The blind mechanical universe absolutely does not care exactly how many complex quantum theories you logically understand. The infinite massive quantum field absolutely does not reward you for reading every single book written by Neville Goddard. The physical matrix only mathematically responds to your actual active heavy state of consciousness in the eternal present moment. When you are constantly desperately searching for more spiritual information, you are actively loudly declaring to the blind universe that you completely entirely lack the required power to succeed right now. A supreme, untouchable God absolutely does not need to read a massive, heavy book to figure out exactly how to be a god. An absolute elite psychopathic monarch sitting on a massive, heavy throne of gold absolutely does not frantically, desperately search the physical internet for new techniques on how to perfectly rule their massive empire. They simply cold, confidently assume their absolute sovereign position, and they violently, forcefully dictate their supreme rules to the dead physical mirror. Your constant, desperate search for more information is the absolute, definitive mathematical proof that you completely lack faith in your own supreme internal power. However, we must immediately deeply address the terrifying, massive biological trap that is actively waiting to aggressively attack you right now. I completely, absolutely know exactly what will scientifically happen the exact microsecond you attempt to completely stop studying and actively try to simply assume your massive wealth. Your conscious logical mind will entirely agree to completely stop searching for new hidden techniques. But your primitive physical animal brain is a completely different, heavy biological machine. Your physical vessel is deeply, intensely, chemically addicted to the constant massive dopamine hits of learning new manifestation theories. When you suddenly completely decide to cut off the massive supply of endless spiritual content, and you force your mind to sit in the absolute quiet stillness of the finished creation, your primitive brain will instantly, violently panic. It will heavily, aggressively perceive this sudden absolute silence as a massive, terrifying threat to your biological survival. It will actively flood your human bloodstream with massive toxic amounts of heavy cortisol, and it will loudly, desperately scream that you do not know enough to successfully manifest the money. You will feel a massive, sickening, overwhelming biological urge to immediately open your physical computer and desperately watch just one more manifestation video to feel completely safe again. Because I absolutely refuse to ever let your primitive, terrified biology ruin your spectacular, instant financial empire. I have deliberately provided the ultimate, uncompromising physical solution entirely for you. You must forcefully, manually override your heavy biological hardware before you can successfully maintain your psychological freedom from the eternal student trap. I want you to completely actively pause this audio right now and look directly below this specific video in the pinned comment section. I have left a highly specific, vital, and incredibly powerful physical protocol entirely there for you. This is absolutely not another pathetic positive affirmation or a new, massive, complicated spiritual theory to study. It is a pure mechanical biological override code. It is completely, deliberately designed to instantly bypass your panicked, addicted logical mind, aggressively regulate your terrified human nervous system, and forcefully flush the toxic survival hormones entirely out of your physical bloodstream. It literally mathematically forces your physical cells to permanently drop the ancient toxic addiction to endless information, completely silence the terrifying biological alarm, and entirely enter a massive state of undeniable, profound physical safety. This heavy state of biological safety is the exact psychological armor completely required to simply exist as the owner without needing more spiritual theories. Go to the pinned comment right now. Use this exact protocol to manually turn off your massive biological resistance, and then come right back here to learn how to completely avoid the final, most destructive physical trap of the dead three: dimensional mirror. Now that your physical vessel is entirely calm and the massive toxic biological addiction to spiritual information has been completely forcefully flushed from your human bloodstream, you are perfectly prepared to entirely adopt the absolute psychopathic diet of the elite creator. The true elite master of the law of assumption operates on a completely, entirely different psychological level than the pathetic amateur student. The elite creator absolutely strictly practices a massive, relentless diet of the mind. They completely forcefully refuse to consume any spiritual or financial information that contradicts their ultimate massive assumption. They deeply, intimately understand that absolute, supreme manifestation requires massive, intense mental focus, entirely directed at one single heavy assumption. When the elite psychopathic creator aggressively decides that they are currently a massive multimillionaire, they do not logically need 20 different psychological techniques to maintain that exact identity. They pick the absolute simplest core assumption, and they violently, mercilessly lock their human attention onto that specific reality, completely ignoring every single other voice in the physical world. They entirely violently close the massive spiritual books. They turn off the endless digital videos, and they simply completely rest in the heavy, terrifying power of their own absolute silent authority. You must completely, deeply realize that true spiritual mastery is absolutely not about desperately accumulating massive amounts of human knowledge. True absolute mastery is the violent, aggressive subtraction of absolutely everything that is not your ultimate final goal. You must entirely, brutally, completely simplify your entire manifestation process today. You must absolutely, completely stop looking outside of your own physical body for the massive magic secret that will finally save you. You are the exact massive magic secret you have been desperately, relentlessly searching for your entire human life. The massive invisible developer console that completely controls the massive physical simulation is already entirely perfectly installed directly inside your own divine human imagination. You absolutely do not need to download another spiritual update, and you completely do not need another complex guru to teach you exactly how to press the massive activation button. You simply entirely forcefully decide right now in this exact microsecond that you already have absolutely all the massive information you will ever logically need. The physical matrix completely relies on your constant, massive hesitation to keep you completely trapped in the middle-class survival mode. Every single day you spend desperately trying to learn exactly how to perfectly manifest is another complete physical day that the matrix successfully, completely keeps your massive money away from you. The physical system loves the eternal student because the eternal student is entirely, completely harmless to the massive corporate structure. The student never actually claims the massive physical money because the student is entirely too busy preparing to claim the massive money. You must violently, completely violently rip up your massive spiritual student card today. You must absolutely, permanently, entirely fire yourself from the pathetic, exhausting job of learning how to be rich. You must aggressively, violently hire yourself as the absolute, supreme, sovereign dictator of your massive, infinite financial empire. You step entirely away from the massive physical chalkboard of theory, and you confidently, arrogantly sit directly on the heavy, massive physical throne of pure, absolute execution. You completely, entirely replace the desperate, toxic action of seeking with the cold, terrifying, psychopathic action of commanding. The blind universe will mathematically, flawlessly, entirely obey the massive, silent command of the elite creator, who completely refuses to learn and only forcefully expects to receive. We must now entirely enter the final and absolute most powerful psychological chamber of this massive masterclass to completely, violently destroy the absolute deadliest trap in the entire physical matrix. You have successfully entirely dropped the toxic illusion of hoping for tomorrow, and you have violently, forcefully ripped up your pathetic spiritual student card. You are now boldly sitting on the heavy, massive throne of the eternal present moment. But the dead physical matrix has one absolute, final, terrifying trap completely designed to violently pull you directly off your sovereign throne. I call this the massive, toxic trap of the dead mirror. This trap is completely, entirely based on the primitive biological habit of constantly checking the physical three-dimensional world for logical mathematical proof. You brilliantly, powerfully assume the heavy God state in the early morning. You deeply, physically feel your massive, infinite wealth. But 3 short hours later, you casually open your physical bank application just to gently check if the massive money has finally magically arrived. I am going to completely, violently shatter this pathetic biological habit right now. Constantly checking the dead physical mirror is the exact specific reason why the massive money mathematically absolutely never arrives. To deeply, completely understand exactly why looking for physical proof entirely destroys your massive financial empire, you must deeply study the brilliant agricultural metaphor provided by the uncompromising teachings of Neville Goddard. Neville perfectly explained that assuming a massive physical desire is exactly like carefully planting a completely perfect biological seed directly into the dark, fertile soil of the infinite quantum field. When a master farmer carefully plants a massive, valuable seed, they completely, absolutely know that the seed mathematically completely requires absolute total darkness and massive physical stillness to successfully germinate and grow strong. Massive roots. The master farmer absolutely does not go out into the physical field every single morning and violently dig up the biological seed just to logically check if it is growing. The true farmer deeply, intimately understands that exposing the delicate seed to the harsh physical light of doubt will completely, instantly kill the biological organism. But this is exactly what the massive majority of amateur manifestors do every single physical day. Every single time you nervously, quietly check your physical bank account or desperately look at your physical wallet to find proof of your manifestation, you are violently, aggressively digging up the quantum seed. You are exposing your massive, delicate assumption to the harsh, toxic light of logical human doubt, and you completely, mathematically kill your massive financial empire before it can even begin to physically grow. You must deeply, entirely understand the exact, absolute mechanics of the three-dimensional physical reality to successfully stop digging up your quantum seeds. You have been heavily, aggressively brainwashed to deeply believe that the physical world is the absolute, final, objective truth. This is a massive, terrifying biological lie. The three-dimensional physical world is absolutely not the fundamental truth. The physical matrix is absolutely nothing more than a completely dead mechanical mirror. And you must completely realize that this massive dead physical mirror has a massive, completely heavy time delay. It is exactly like a completely slow, outdated digital computer screen. When you look directly at your physical empty bank account, you are absolutely not looking at your current present reality. You are completely, exclusively looking at a massive, dead, delayed echo of your old, expired assumptions. The physical lack of money you see with your physical human eyes is nothing more than a heavy dead shadow cast by the poor, desperate identity you used to have several weeks or several months ago. Trying to mathematically judge your current massive God state by looking at the delayed physical mirror is exactly like looking at a dead star in the physical sky that actually entirely burned out millions of years ago. When you allow the dead delayed reflection of the physical mirror to actively dictate your internal psychological state, you completely mathematically surrender your supreme sovereign power to a dead digital glitch. The amateur, terrified manifester looks at the empty physical bank application. Their human eyes send a massive, terrifying biological signal to their primitive animal brain, and they immediately violently drop their heavy gold crown. They immediately loudly complain that the massive law of assumption absolutely does not work, and they rapidly, violently spiral directly back into the massive, exhausting middle-class survival mode. You absolutely must never make this massive, catastrophic mistake ever again. The elite psychopathic creator deeply, intimately, completely understands the massive delay of the physical mirror. When the elite creator physically receives a massive, expensive physical bill or looks at an entirely empty digital bank screen, they absolutely do not experience a single drop of biological panic. The elite creator looks directly at the physical lack of money and completely arrogant smiles with absolute cold psychopathic apathy. They treat the massive physical bill exactly like a completely fake physical joke printed by a broken digital machine. You must aggressively, deliberately practice this massive, heavy state of psychopathic apathy every single time the physical matrix tries to show you the toxic illusion of poverty. You must entirely, violently close your physical human senses to the dead external reality. Neville Goddard explicitly, violently commanded his dedicated students to completely deny the physical evidence of the biological senses. This is absolutely not a pathetic mental game of fake toxic positivity. It is the absolute highest form of supreme quantum physics. By violently, aggressively, completely refusing to emotionally react to the dead delayed mirror, you forcefully, aggressively starve the old, poor reality of your massive divine biological energy. The delayed physical mirror mathematically completely requires your constant massive biological reaction to stay physically alive. The exact microsecond you completely stop reacting to the physical lack of money, the physical illusion of poverty instantly, violently loses its biological life support system. The blind mechanical universe looks at your cold, heavy, unbothered apathy and mathematically entirely realizes that the physical mirror is completely lagging behind the true internal reality. The massive quantum machine is then entirely, violently, mathematically forced to violently scramble millions of physical atoms and massive physical events to quickly, entirely update the dead physical screen to flawlessly match your new, heavy, massive, multi-millionaire identity. You absolutely do not negotiate with the dead, delayed mirror. You completely, violently, arrogantly dictate to the mirror exactly what it must flawlessly reflect. You simply confidently sit in your heavy leather chair, you cross your human arms, and you entirely, completely allow the massive, slow physical computer to finally finish completely loading the massive new digital level of your infinite physical wealth. If you have completely absorbed the heavy, uncompromising frequency of this massive masterclass, your psychological architecture has been permanently, entirely, completely rewritten. You are absolutely no longer a blind, desperate victim, completely unknowingly falling into the massive hidden traps of the physical matrix. You have successfully, completely destroyed the toxic illusion of tomorrow. You have violently, forcefully burned your pathetic eternal student card, and you have completely mastered the cold, terrifying psychopathic apathy required to deeply ignore the dead, delayed physical mirror. You have successfully, completely mapped the entire hidden digital minefield of the spiritual community, and you now clearly, confidently walk directly, safely toward your massive physical empire, completely untouched by the massive, chaotic failures of the normal human race. You completely, entirely understand that your absolute only physical job is to firmly, arrogantly hold the heavy feeling of the finished present creation completely independent of absolutely any delayed physical evidence. But to permanently, completely, entirely lock this terrifying, untouchable, vigilant identity into the physical matrix of your reality, and to mathematically prove to your own biological nervous system that you completely possess the final, supreme map of the matrix, you must take one final, entirely irreversible physical action. You must completely, violently cut the massive, heavy cord to the blind, ignorant masses and silently, forcefully step directly onto the massive, heavy throne of your absolute guaranteed wealth without ever looking back. You are the supreme, final, absolute authority of your entire physical existence who has successfully bypassed the massive spiritual traps of the century. To permanently lock this massive, vigilant command directly into your human brain and to absolutely guarantee that the subconscious machine actively, forcefully executes your final physical command at absolute maximum speed, you must immediately issue a physical declaration to the infinite quantum field. I want you to completely step into the quiet, motionless, crushing power of the absolute, untouched, sovereign architect. I want you to completely, actively scroll down to the comments section directly below this specific physical video. I want you to type the exact final code with the absolute, terrifying, cold certainty of a supreme digital creator who completely, flawlessly avoids every single trap of the physical simulation. Do not type it with pathetic, weak human hope, and absolutely do not type it with desperate biological excitement. Type it with the heavy, unbothered, completely cold apathy of a royal king who is simply giving an absolute, undeniable mathematical command to their own mechanical universe. Type the exact words. I completely reverse the law. My massive wealth is mathematically guaranteed. Let the physical movement of your human fingers typing those exact words be the absolute, final, last moment you ever passionately, desperately use your own quantum power against yourself. Make the ultimate, uncompromising physical declaration right now by typing, I completely reverse the law. My massive wealth is mathematically guaranteed. The massive, toxic illusions of the spiritual matrix are completely, entirely destroyed. The biological urge to violently check the physical reality is permanently, entirely turned off, and your massive millions of dollars are mathematically, securely rushing toward you completely, flawlessly. Go sit in the pristine, flawless safety of your completely new, overpowered identity. Cross your physical arms and deeply, casually enjoy the spectacular automatic wealth that your beautiful psychopathic vigilance has already violently forced into physical existence.